Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. In this edition, looking at Solaris 1.0, which happens to be the winner of the 2023 KVR Developer Challenge. And that's been a big deal for quite a lot of years. Quite a lot of the winners have gone on to do quite well for themselves, Uhi being one of them. It's a patchy thing from year to year. Sometimes we get something really good, sometimes we just get not much. I looked through when the voting started and tried a few things that kind of leapt out to me personally. I saw this, but I just sort of thought, well, why would I want that? That's a personal choice. No reflection on the device because I didn't even try, but as a personal choice, it's like, oh, well, that looks interesting and that looks interesting. And I gotta just say, eek. The sad thing was that they were poorly designed, and unfortunately, one or both of them created crashes. So my advice to anybody who's watching this is focus on your basics. While you can't make something work necessarily in every door very easily, seeing I work in Reason, which can be a little persnickety, it's worth looking at as many as you can, and if it crashes in Reaper, it's one of those things. It might happen, but yeah, you've got to be a little careful of that, because obviously that's a real negative. But most importantly, the really big thing is that the thing has to be usable. It's all very well to build something that I think is the coolest thing ever because I thought of it and I. But that's what I refer to as Me Too stuff. It's like where you're just making the same thing as everybody else. It's like me if I released an EQ unit and it looked and behaved exactly the same as FabFilter Pro 3. You'd just be kind of like, what's the point of this? We've got to bring something special, but we've also got to create a workflow that works and is easy. Now, Adam Szabo actually won, apparently hands down, in no unclear manner. There was no Trumpy recount needed here. There was a big difference, and that made me think, well, what is this? What has he really got? And, in terms of usability, well, firstly, it works, winning. He's had some help there because it is made in a platform in Flowstone. I keep going to call it Synth Maker because that's what it was when I used it like a few decades ago. Flowstone is a solid and reliable platform that sounds good. I don't know why I don't use it now. I think I just decided to go synth edit and that was just the thing. But that helps with his ability to land something that works, and that's a thing that we should consider. It's all very well to say, but I coded it in machine language. I put every 1 and 0 in there. But that's just ego. That's Me Tooism. Let's make sure something works. You can always go and hand code it later if you want. But the workflow is what I think has really had Adam win here. It sounds good, but everything sounds good. Its workflow is nice. A few little kooks, but it's nice. Speaking of winner devs, I hope that you have all downloaded and are assiduously learning and integrating into your life Hertz Box, which just came out a week ago. Have at it. It's a unique kind of a toy. That one I would encourage you very much not to just wade in, but to RTFM and or watch the video, which is the video equivalent of the FM. What we have here is a unit called Solaris, and it's a reverb with a strong emphasis on big, long reverbs and this thing called Shimmer. Here is a patch I created earlier. I turned off the reverb from it. Now let's turn on the Solaris. That's nice. That is nice. Now, you all know I'm not massive on these big smooth reverbs, but this is nice. It's got a very simple, unassuming character, which I think is good. Reverbs that are somehow too like, wow, that's amazing on their own, I find really difficult. I don't feel like this delaminates from the source sound. It picks it up and expands it in a huge way, as well as being able to add this shimmer thing, which we will discuss later. So, in, not in, 100%, So if you're using a conventional reverb unit and finding that there's a certain kind of sound and feel that you're hearing in things that you can't work out how to get there, it's entirely possible that what you're encountering is Shimmer. Hear how this is adding a extra something? That's this shimmer bit. And we will have a look at that as we get into the walkthrough part. So as a direct A-B, it's a bit dramatic, it's a bit exciting. Let's get rid of him. Next one, another one that I created earlier. These are actually from a refill of mine. Again, reverb is off. That's just because there was reverb already in the system. As such, this preset wouldn't necessarily be what one would be using in the middle of a rock song, because it's a little excessive. But if you're looking for that huge thing, this delivers very, very nicely. Let's also disappear him, and one more example, there. So, cool sound focused on the filter movement. Let's just turn this down so we don't have a straight pop. Oh, we still did. Again, here how that's adding a whole lot of stuff that is clearly related to, but wasn't really there in the original. Now, it's easy to make an absolute mess with this kind of stuff because it is, well, dramatic. But in the right situation and with the right kind of mix, and probably slow playing, then you're getting really, really nice results. That impresses me, as does its workflow, its usability. It is surprisingly simple to use. Few oddities, but overall good. So who's this Adam Szabo person? I've heard the name floating around before. Turns out that he's had some minor success in trance. Armin van Buuren's name is dropped even, so that must be serious. A sort of in-joke between myself and every developer who puts Armin van Buuren on their website. And some years ago, I vaguely recall this, he released an instrument called Viper. And Viper obviously is based around a virus. So he was one of the possibly earlier people to have something that was very virus-like in software. I think it may also be built in Flowstone, not SynthMaker, Flowstone. But I haven't tried it. Just pressing play on the videos, it's got that kind of sound. Obviously, everything on his website's got that sound, that very trancey sort of thing. But what I like, at least just looking at the picture of the GUI, is that it seems pretty logically put together. That's important. I would rather a device that's highly usable than one that's got all kinds of amazeballs, this, that, and the other, but it is not very usable. So I think that's part of why he's won here. And again, while some people might be like, you can't use Synth or whatever, it's like, why do we care? You go out and you buy any device, you buy an 1176. Well, now you have to buy a clone, so that's based on the real 1176, so you can't get too bent out of shape about that. And when you crack that open, 99 or 100% of the components are off the shelf. So if you could go down to your Radio Shack or whoever sells greebly little components, and in theory, build yourself one of these things. So we're all springboarding off the back of others. And again, if using a platform means that you get a better reliability and better, faster turnaround, there's nothing wrong with that. There will be some limits, but chances are they're not real practical, problematic sorts of limits. In terms of price, I should have mentioned, part of the KVR Developer Challenge is that each of these devices has to be free so that people can freely download them and try them and vote on them and what have you. So it is often used by entry-level developers or developers who are looking for a bit of promo. And in this case, I think Adam Szabo really won because he's gotten a lot of people to visit his site. And the fact that he's won is sort of saying, hey, this guy does good work. And based on this, I think he does do good work. It's made me think, oh, I wonder what Viper's like to use. So that's a big win there, that he can get people to go, oh, is this the thing I want to have a look at? So you can go to his website, download this without any dramas whatsoever. I found it installed easily, no difficulties whatsoever there. We might as well run through my good and bad, and then we will walk through the device and how it works. Righto. So what's good? It obviously sounds huge. It is enormous in sound, and that is the whole idea. It's got really one purpose, and that is to sound huge, and it delivers that incredibly well. That's a bit tricky to do in Reverb. For somebody who works on making reverbs that are overly long, there are a lot of difficulties in doing that without making it start to become very problematic. The solution that he's used here is probably huge amounts of all-pass diffusion, but it's smooth, so that's nice. It is overall, I wrote pretty easy, but I think I have this thing of saying pretty easy, like half, but it's very easy to use, bar a couple of little things. So that's probably part of why I didn't write very easy to use, but broadly, once you get used to that, it is very easy to use, and of course, it is free. But the free is not the most important bit. There's plenty of stuff that's free that I download and I throw it straight off my drive, because all it is going to be is negative clutter. So something like this, yeah, I'm probably not going to use it a lot, but there are certain things that it does incredibly well. It can function as a general reverb unit as well, which we will look at in here. So it's really pretty darn easy to use, very easy to use once you get used to its couple of oddities. Very versatile if you are prepared to work with it for what it is. So there's nothing to stop somebody from saying, okay, that's going to be my go-to reverb unit. Probably better not to use a Shimmer whilst doing that, but there's no reason it probably couldn't. I haven't tried it in a mix, but indicators are it would work just fine. In terms of bads, there are some odd controls. The way they operate is a little unintuitive. I didn't find an RTFM, so that obviously is a little bit of a downside as well. It doesn't really need it though, but to be fair, with 30 or so years of experience under my belt, my approach to this sort of thing, my ability to grok something fast is going to be different from a lot of people who'll be scrabbling around looking for the best free something or other, which is always the stupidest thing to do anyway. So yeah, an RTFM probably would have been nice, particularly to explain a couple of the sections, the chorale and the Shimmer sections. While I think I have a pretty fair idea of what's going on, I think could definitely use some explanation to help people understand how to use them and how to get the most out of them. Otherwise, they're probably going to use them randomly, which is, of course, wrong. Random is always wrong. The other negative that we've got to put in is fairness, and it's not the fault of the device or the developer, but many people will overuse this. It is possible, incredibly easy to massively overuse in the impression that it gives you this amazing amazefulness. Yeah, if as a mix engineer, if somebody sent me tracks to mix that were covered in this, I would probably send them back. Not to say that they can't be an integral part of a particular sound, but much more than any basic judicious use would probably have to go back as unmixable soup. So just be very, very careful, because it's so big and so dramatic, which is its strength, that can be its weakness as well if you are not well seasoned and realizing how to sort of corral it. It will just overtake everything and turn your whole mix into just bad soup. And then you'll be doing all kinds of mixing trickery, which shouldn't happen in the first place, to try to solve the fundamental problem of just overdone this rather grand reverb. Now we'll move into the fun part of the program, which is digging into what it does and how it does it. Oh, we have another one open, and we've got a drum loop, courtesy of Gore and Grooves. So this is the Deliberately Dry Studio Legend, which has no reverb on board or inside the samples. So we are very, very dry. And quality playing there, courtesy of Beatmap, which is a semi-random thing and is wonderfully overplaying. Let's switch this in. That's the default, which obviously is not suited to this. So it's just my way of, again, saying we need to be very careful we do not overuse this, because it's super easy to do that. Looking across, we've got patches. The patches are okay. I guess just don't use these as a basis for a patch that you're going to put into use. I would very strongly encourage just going from the basic sound that's here and then working on what you need by using the controls. If you don't want to use the controls, put no reverb on whatsoever and hand it to your mix engineer. If you're not prepared to hire a mix engineer, then you need to learn to do it properly, which means don't use presets. They are only there to give you a sense of what the thing can do. Spend the time to learn it, otherwise this thing will be overused. There are some basic controls for loading and saving of presets and what have you. You've got various sizes for GUI, from quite small, which stays surprisingly readable, up to quite large. Didn't go as big as it would go, but it is nicely resizable. And of course we can go over to his website. All simple there. You can also resize here. Actually, that's the biggest version. And it stays nice and clear, so I assume that's all built into Flowstone and how it works. Actually, we might as well leave it this size. Our main masters here, we can obviously turn it on and off. If we have something in the pipe and turn it off and turn it back on again, that is normal. So don't see that as a bug. Pretty well all software is going to do that. Because it's so long, you're just going to notice an awful lot more. So if you are using this in a mix, especially with a really long thing, just make sure that if you've got something sitting in the buffer like that, that when you start your render, that is not going to come back out of the buffer. Many DAWs will handle that and clear the buffer before you start, but there are certain situations, especially like if you're doing a real-time recording, where that may just happen. That's not the fault of the plugin, it's just, well, it's the laws of physics. We've got our wet-dry balance. And an unelucidated warm button, which seems just to be some sort of a low-pass filter that just gets rid of some of the fizz on top. There are times you're going to want that fizz. There are times you are not. So no right or wrong there. So it's just some kind of preset tone control. We'll deal with the elephant in the room first. Now we've got pre-delay. Pre-delay is one of those things that's kind of weird until it makes sense. Now in a room, there's me, I'm speaking, and there's a wall, let's say 200 meters away. So it's a big basketball court kind of a room, and I say hello, and it takes time for my hello to go hit that wall and bounce back. So if it takes a second to hit that wall, it takes a second to come back and hit me again. So we end up with the first bounce back being a couple of seconds away. I have no idea what that number is. They all seem to just be based on MIDI. So we get, as it shows here, a gap between the sound and the echo coming back. Here, if you get it wrong, it's awful. But you get it right, it's great. One frustration that I have here is that there is a really, really long gap. Now, maybe there's a reason for that, but it does make it a little harder to fine-tune. Normally you want short numbers. Personally, I would have rather that this has a little button next to it. The fact that it's got exceedingly long times is it's potentially interesting, so I'm like all for it being able to do that, but I'd rather a little button that says long so that we can focus on getting more definition in here, because that's where it's most useful. So that gives the feeling of a more natural room, but also a larger room, as well as creating a little bit of space, which not only reflects a real room, excusing the pun, but it allows that initial sound to come through clearer before it's got its echo. So the pre-delay is actually really nice and I like it a lot, bar the fact that I think it needs another button so that we can have a lot more finesse in the beginning throw. There is the ability to sync this to time. I am opposed to this, but people will like it. The reason I'm opposed is because it's not natural. A room is never BPM synced. We don't walk into a room and it'd have a little sign over the door saying that this room runs at 126 BPM. Therefore, it's a perfect disco room. We walk into another room that says my BPM is 94. Therefore, it's a perfect miserable rapper room. This is not reality. So very strongly, I would discourage you from using it, while other people will go, this is so cool about it, you can be perfect. The world is never perfect. Great rhythms are never perfect. The better the drummer, the less drum machine-like they are. They flow, they move. They're not out of time, they're controlling time, they're setting time. So if you're going to use this as a rhythmic element, which is quite commonly done, Prince used reverbs rhythmically all the time, then do this by hand, because you're going to actually end up choosing some kind of beat division. But chances are the way that you choose it when you're working within the groove of your piece, and my drum loop here is not very, it's too busy, but it was chosen for other reasons, is that you're going to end up with something that actually grooves. Like you're going to have your pre-delay here come a little early or a little late, and that's going to create the kind of groove that defines your piece, far more than just being lazy and going, well, there you go, I use 1/16 or whatever because that's lazy, that's not good engineering. So the pre-delay is actually really good, bar a lack of ability to control the bit where it really can't. So if you're watching Adam, please change that. That, puts you from a sort of 4.5 up to a 5, just with the one thing. Next we've got chorale, but we're going to come back to that in a moment. We've got the reverb size. Now we can tell it's algorithmic, which is great. It's not built on IRs because it changes speed, so it is built on delays. Wonderful. That's part of why I like the sound of it, because I hate IRs. They never feel like they belong. I don't care what people think, this is how I feel. So we can go from short reverbs. Again, maybe you could argue that we could have a little bit more definition here, just having the little short and long button, but it's probably not as necessary. You've got a huge amount of grab ability here. And we don't start to hear rattlies until you get stupid long. Of course, some wise person's going to come up with the idea of automating this, which I'm all for. Really am all for. Just take a little bit of care when you do it, that it's productive. Don't just do it to be drunken lo-fi hipster, but there's a little bit of mileage in that, because a lot of reverb won't let you do that. So reverb size, that defines how long our reverb runs for. Now we'll look at chorale. It's got an amount and then a vowel. So chorale meaning as in choir-like. So it's a formant filter that will run through A, E, I, O, U, what have you. So it's a way of imparting some tone on the room. It's an unusual choice, I've got to say, but it's an interesting choice. So if I say, look, I kind of like the smackiness that it's bringing in the snare there. There's no right or wrong. It's an odd choice, but it's an interesting choice. It will probably work a little bit better at low settings. With care, but it's unique, so I kind of like that. We then got this Shimmer thing. Now, I don't understand how he's done it, but basically it's adding what appears to be a pitch shifter into the signal. And it can easily... You can hear it climbing. We'll turn that off for the moment. And you've got a pair of them. So we could we'll have one that falls. So one's going up, one's going down. On drums, it's just an ungodly noise. But with a little bit of care, and we do have fairly limited control over the precision here. Again, I would kind of rather just a little range button. So the first one goes like up to one semitone, and then the other one goes to the bigger range, whatever. And also they're preset to particular amounts. And while I understand that, I'm always interested in the in-betweens as well, because it's the in-betweens, how we handle them, that we get interesting. But it works quite nicely. So you wouldn't always want to have such a strong thing, and you would rarely do it on drums. They do almost seem to be a little bit, while related, but a little separate from this. So I'm not sure whether they're inside the actual reverb or whether they're sitting alongside it, kind of like using a delay unit on a send. It doesn't become part of the room, it just sits alongside it. Interesting, I guess there's no particular right or wrong, but I don't necessarily feel like they become part of the reverb, but it's interesting. So the combination of the chorale and the shimmer means that particularly for pads, you can get that feeling of it becoming a whole other synth sound, which is why some of the presets and the pad sounds will tend to be up to 100%, so that they're adding this tone or replacing this tone. And that's interesting. Would I use it all the time? Well, if I reached for this reverb because I want that sound on pads, yeah, probably would. We then got the filter. This is a tone filter. So we've got a low pass. Oh, dragging down doesn't work. You have to drag up to apply low pass. That's probably the number one WTF that I have. I just think it's a silly choice. Normally we expect to lower a low pass. That's our TB303 filter. And to raise a high pass. Let's just go. So it just feels a little upside down. But this allows us to set a specific tone and to, like that. Is a unique sound. That's a kind of sound that I might say, okay, that is my room, and that's what I'm going to use. And I'd be really pleased with that coming out. It definitely works super nice for this snare, gives it a sort of a military type kind of feel. Nice for metal work. So it's cool. It's just weird that this knob is upside down. There's no reason that it would work this way that I can foresee. I know there's a bit of a fashion in upside down knobs because back in the 50s knobs tended to work upside down. Well, sorry, flick switches often worked upside down, but low pass filters are always you turn them down, not up. But nonetheless, it is there and you just get used to it. But the first time you come to it after you haven't used it for a little while, you will go, this doesn't work properly. It's one of those things that, again, I would just sort of rather in a 1.2 or something like that was just changed. It's going to improve the pretty easy to use to like, wow, really super cool to use. And then you've got modulation. This is very normal that we will have. We'll just open these back out a bit. Modulation. It just helps add a little bit of movement to that sound, so it thickens the reverb up a little bit. Also, not that this seems to suffer from that at all, but it's quite common that there be modulation to reduce some whininess when you get into really long. A tiny bit of tone there, but it's a subtle modulation, so it's not as exciting as the which I showed before, but with doors being the way they are, then you can assign some kind of modulation to this and do that if you want to make it more, which will affect obviously the length as well. That's it. It's pleasingly simple to use, bar those couple of little things. I mean, definitely the low pass being upside down is just, it is annoying and off-putting. And then just a little bit more ability, particularly here, to control the finesse of things, assuming that everybody's just going to be lazy and dumb and use the sync button. Yes, it's popular to put there. I deliberately don't put them there, but fair enough. But allow me to have the kind of control that I'm looking for here, especially if I was going to run with a stupid long time like this. Let's say I've broken out my snare. Then give me the finesse to find what I want a little bit more. But overall, it deserved to win. I didn't look at everything that it was in the competition, but as I say, sadly, the few that sort of stood out as being, oh, that's a possible contender for something I might use, just were not good, unfortunately, and that's a shame. And I hope those developers do learn why they didn't win, rather than just being sort of about it. It's probably worth them engaging somebody who's a bit more experienced in this, not with somebody who's just loud in forums and is going to tell them to put wall padding on their condenser microphone, or something really stupid like that. But real usability expert to help take their idea, grounded in something that's, you know, the fundamentals, the expected, and then to have their unique thing. This probably isn't unique, but it is so nicely delivered that it just works and it does the thing that it's set out to do very nicely. And at free, it puts itself into the arena of being a very nice contender against Valhalla. Now, Valhalla have some freebies, but they're a lot more complicated to use. And honestly, the complicatedness of their usage tends to actually put me off using them. Whereas this, I think, well, yeah, it's probably rare that I would want it, but if I did hit the situation where it's like, you know what, Benedict, what this really needs is that kind of reverb, then I would remember this positively and pull it in, rather than that feeling of like, which many other things have. So that's the reason that this has won, because it does its job. Like I say, it gets in, it does its job, and then it gets the hell out of the way, and is pleasing to use. That's great, and so he deserves all the credit and accolade that hopefully he's getting from this. If you are after an interesting reverb, if you are after something that will do stupid long or interesting character like this chorale stuff, then I think this is super. I would have been truly delighted to have made this myself. That's it. So get out there, try it. My name again, Benedict for Higher Hertz. There's higherhertz.com, and of course, don't forget there's Hertzbox and Hertz Multiply and Hertz Delay, which are also freebies. They paddle in a similar pool to this, but very different sort of sound, which is something that I like. That I can see this as being a complementary thing to what I do. As in, if I used this I might actually combine it with one of those devices, so you get some of the Benedict sound, some of the sort of big, enormous, absurd, trancey kind of sound that pulls it into my sphere as well. So don't think that reverb units you should only use on their own and that's it. You know, you pile them up. Not necessarily on separate sends. Sometimes I'll do them on separate sends, but often I put them into a little chain so that by the time the sound's coming back out, it's like, it's not, oh, look, there's some other lazy person using ProQ. Get out, have fun. If you have any questions, please not about the device, that should go to Adam himself, but about the content here, please make sure you've watched the video first. It really annoys me when people ask questions based on their not watching the videos. Why should I answer when you haven't given me the time of day to actually get the answer in the first place? Pop it down below, preferably after hitting subscribe, and when I'm aware of it, then if it's a genuine question, I will pop over and give you some help or advice. Alrighty, get out there, have fun. This has been a fun device to take in and try, and it's not going to get deleted at the end of the process because, as I say, I will remember it positively for when the time comes up and it's like, that's the thing I'm looking for. That's what matters. Have a great day.